After too long an absence, unfortunately due to COVID restrictions, we are very happy to welcome as our speaker today, Pravrajika Gitaprana, a longtime friend of our society. Mataji is the Minister of Residence at the historical Vivekananda Retreat, Ridgeley, which was founded in 1997, dedicated to preserving and continuing the universal teachings of Swami Vivekananda. Since 2004, Mataji has presided over this 82-acre retreat, which offers retreatants opportunities to deepen their personal spiritual practice in a beautiful, quiet, and peaceful atmosphere. Prior to taking charge of Ridgeley Retreat, Pravrajika Gitaprana was a monastic since 1984 at the Vedanta Society of Southern California under the leadership of revered Swami Swahanandaji. She is a very popular speaker within the Vedanta family, also very active in the interfaith community. The subject of her talk today is embracing life.
Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejaswina Vadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So Ridgeley, like everywhere else, was shut down in March of 2020 and remained closed almost for 2 years. Because every time we tried to open, another surge, another this, another that, and we had to close back down. The problem with Ridgeley is that we both work and live in the place where all our visitors are. And so we cannot risk the lives of our staff, having all kinds of people come. But we tried opening a little bit last year, and then Omicron happened. But Ridgeley is open now. And by the grace of God, we will not have to close down again. We haven't resumed our organized retreats yet, but tours and overnight stays we're conducting now. I'm just waiting to make sure that we can invite large amounts of people at the same time before we organize a retreat. I have also some Ridgeley news that if you're familiar with Ridgeley and have ever taken one of our tours, I want to go on record as saying, if you've heard the anecdote about Swami Vivekananda and playing golf, have you heard that? So at Ridgeley Manor, it was said that Hollister Sturges, Betty Leggett's son, was playing golf, and Swami Vivekananda wanted to know what he was doing. He'd never seen anything like that. And so Hollister explained the rules of golf to him, and Swamiji said, "I bet I can hit a hole-in-one." And Hollister said, "No, you've never played before. How could you possibly do that?" And so some money was bet, a fair amount of money. It was either $10 or $20, which in 1899 was a lot of money. And Swamiji won. He hit a hole-in-one in his first try. Shudatma Prana and I, and even Swami Atmarupananda, highly doubted that there was ever a golf course at Ridgeley. And whenever we give tours, we've been telling people, we don't think that happened here. We think it happened at a hotel not too far away from here that had the first golf course in the United States. But a devotee in St. Louis does kind of online research concerning Swami Vivekananda and all the places that he has been in the West. And she came across an article just recently that said that Francis Leggett did have one of the first golf courses in the United States on his own property. So we were wrong. It was at Ridgeley. We just don't know where. All right, so my talk, Embracing Life, is going to be pretty much entirely practical and very short on philosophy. Ridgeley has a couple Zoom classes. And one of them is on Sunday afternoons, well, Sunday kind of afternoon, evening, where the sisters who live in the United States, and which usually means for the class maybe anywhere between 9 to 13 of them, all get together on Zoom. We call the class Ask the Sisters, and people email me any kind of question that they would have. The sisters do not know anything about the questions in advance, and so then I kind of ask question by question, and the sisters answer as they think. And of course, you have to remember, this is not a homogenous group of people. And so there are many different kinds of spiritual stances, many different attitudes, and sometimes not disagreements so much as different ways of looking at it. The sisters love the class, and so they keep coming. They don't have to. They're doing it only because they love to be there. And most of the questions are entirely practical. So it gave me the idea, all right, we're going to do this. I had been thinking about this also, because if we are going to embrace our life, we have to put the Upanishadic saying, Ishavashyam idam sarvam, cover everything with God, into practice in the life that we have, not the life that we wish we had, or the life that they had 3,000 years ago. And so that means the life that we're leading in the way that we lead it. And we have to do this not just during the times of our meditation or puja or whatever we do, but during every kind of part of our day. How we bring awareness into every part of our day. Otherwise, since mind was what we call mind, the notion that we have that we call mind is, as Katha Upanishad says, made to turn outwards. And it will. So what we need to do is use that very kind of conceptual and even deeper mind to make the choice to turn inwards. And so it won't really help if all we're doing is, say, every now and then remembering that we have a spiritual goal. So how to do it in the life that we lead, none of us, including me, are remotely anything like the yogis of old living in the Himalayas with no outside contact. So we have to make the general kinds of principles the yogis follow ours. Another thing is, if we are in the habit of just repeating our Vedanta as if we are glibly repeating something like we learned at in school, you know what I mean? 2 by 2 is 4, 4 by 4. If we're just rote repeating what we read in the Bhagavad Gita, it will help us, but it won't help us that much. We have to make it our own. And our own doesn't mean what this commentator or that commentator or even that Swami said. It's how we internalize it for ourselves, how we understand it. We can take the help of all those things, but ultimately we have to make it our own. You're probably familiar with the Sanskrit terms Pravrtti and Nivriti. The path of the yogis of old and the path of, say, for instance, the Advaita Vedanta of Shankara is typically called a Nivriti path, a path that we could say glibly turns away from the world. And the path called Pravrtti is the path, say, practiced by the Shakta tradition, those who worship the Divine Mother, and other traditions that turn towards the world but spiritualize that world. In reality, we need both. Some of our path needs to be nivriti. There are some things we need to turn away from, but there are many other things that we can embrace in our life and spiritualize, including difficulties. As my teacher, Swami Swahananda, used to make a point of saying, if you're going to take the Pravrtti path, in other words, if you are going to reach out towards your life, we need to remember the nature of life includes both what we call good and what we call misery. And if we take the one, we have to take the other. In other words, the challenging things in life. That life, that's the nature of life. It's not Disneyland, where everything is the happiest place on earth. Life goes up and down, and if we're going to embrace our life, the most difficult thing is learning how to embrace things that are challenging, say, pandemics, war, death, illness, those kinds of things. We also need to remember that our mind, as I said, is built to be a consumer. That what it does is it consumes experience, moment by moment. And maybe if I get through my list, I'll say more about this. And we need to make conscious choices about that. And I don't mean consumer of goods here. I mean every moment, mind is looking for another experience. Another moment, another thing to hear, taste, smell, another moment to be. If you are a Shakta, you would say that's how the Divine Mother lives herself through us. Moment to moment for the next experience, unfolding infinitely. So we're easily distracted, no matter who we are, and we cultivate distraction, and then say we don't. Then we might say, "Oh, well, I can't meditate," but we don't really even try. And I'll get to a little bit more of that. As Swami Vivekananda said many times, he said things like, take an ideal, fill your mind with it, fill the mind with the highest thoughts, think them night and day. This is wonderful advice, and we need to learn how to individualize it. Another thing about this is, I may have already talked about this once, but nobody will remember. In Karma Yoga, he has a chapter called something about self-abnegation. And in that, he makes the point that every thought that we think doesn't stay in our head, basically. That every thought that we think goes out into the universe and kind of is like a radio wave in a certain way that is looking for a similar kind of mind. And when it finds a similar kind of mind, then that mind is receptive and pulls in that thought. And we can see that if we analyze that. So the point here that I'm making is we have to be careful, as we know what kind of things are floating endlessly out there, to put ourselves on a bandwidth that is not destructive. What sometimes I call the blessing bandwidth instead of the disaster bandwidth. That all you have to do is turn on the news and you can happily get yourself on the disaster bandwidth. And sometimes we need to do that, but mostly we don't. Likewise, there's some other things that we can do to put ourselves on the bandwidth. And so here's where the practical list begins. I've pulled this list from some of the things that the sisters said. They have all kinds of suggestions. And some of the things that I practice myself and what I've heard other swamis and devotees say over the many years that I've been doing this. So we are doing these things. We could do these in our life to cultivate awareness of our spiritual goal, however we imagine it to be. whether it's Advaita Vedanta, whether it's devotional path, whatever it is, it has to be in our mode, first of all. As Sri Ramakrishna said, to every person has a path. We have to follow. We may have teachings from our teachers, but we have to make them our own. It can't just be, by rote Vedanta. Okay, so starting in the beginning of the day, wake up earlier. If you are going to say, well, I don't have time to do any of these things. Even if it's only 10 minutes earlier. That it doesn't have to be at 3 o'clock in the morning, but ideally, we need to set our kind of tone of the day at the very beginning of the day, because most of us, including me, live lives where we suddenly jump into our work and that's it for the day until maybe the work is over. And if we don't set the tone in the beginning, we're just more likely to be caught. So wake up earlier. We could call this to spend time with the divine. And we should think about it like that. I would like to suggest that this is the time I get to spend with the divine, or to spend with God, or to go inside, or however you would like to say it. One Swami said, this is how I do it. I think that right before I go for my meditation, I get to be with the God. So, do not. Some of these things are do nots, and some of these things are do's. Do not immediately when you wake up reach for your cell phone. Unless, of course, you're like a doctor on call and you really have to. Or if you're going to reach for your cell phone, use it for your spiritual life. You can program your alarm to be a bhajan. You can do any kinds of stuff, all kinds of stuff with your cell phone. You can have it chant mantras, those kinds of things. But not just picking up the cell phone to look at what's on Facebook or Twitter or whatever is your social media of choice. Unless you're going to use your cell phone for some kind of awakening that has like bhajans on it, or any kind of music that you love, or anything that would automatically remind you, yes, this is my goal. It doesn't have to be bhajans or chanting. It could be, I know someone who loves the Beatles song, Let It Be. So it could be that. There's any number of things it could be. It could be, okay, here I go on a tangent, but I don't know, you've heard of Swami Vivekananda, who used to be in Portland, a disciple of Holy Mother. And when he gave talks, he was in the habit of scolding people that were falling asleep during the lectures. And when I was a kid at the Berkeley Center, there was a new person there, and we were telling him about Swami Vivekananda and that what he was, disciple of Holy Mother. And here in those days, here's a cassette tape. You should listen to one of his lectures. And so this person had to commute quite a ways away, and he was very tired. And we told him nothing about how Swami Vivekananda used to shout at people in the middle of lectures. And he put on the tape, and when he was tired and trying to keep himself awake, and all of a sudden the tape says, wake up, I tell you. And so you could have something like that, the voice of Swami Vivekananda. That if it would help you, this would be great. Swami Swahananda used to practice this. I know many of the sadhus do, and many of the sisters also do. when you do wake up, have some kind of photograph or painting or something that you consider sacred, like a holy picture or, whatever you would consider that you would automatically associate with the divine, as the first thing that you see. So Swami Swahananda had, I think, Sri Ramakrishna, and that's what he saw. And he cultivated the habit of making sure that that's where he looked when he first woke up. And likewise, the first thing out of his mouth had to be some kind of mantra, as it was usually Hari Om. So cultivate that. This is not an unusual thing that happens with people in India in the old days. That the first thing that you see should be something that reminds you of the divine. And the first thing out of your mouth, likewise. Whether it's your own mantra, whether it's another kind of thing, whether it's, something like that. Again, I don't want to say what, because everybody has their own way. Then take the time to set a sankalpa. And what that means is set your intention for the day. We don't just rush into the morning. This is why cultivating getting up a little earlier is a really important thing to do. And what part of that sankalpa should be to remember that we live in a privileged country where there's enough to eat for the most part. We're not being bombed to oblivion. We don't live in a country where religious beliefs are monitored all that much. We have lots of freedoms compared to some of the other places on the earth. We should use that freedom now to practice what in Buddhism is called precious human rebirth. To remember that. Maybe if we're cultivating our intention, I'm going to cover everything with the divine today, we can make an offering along with it. Maybe a water bowl. It doesn't have to be a fancy puja offering. Just something. Or just, however, like I said, it has to be something that resonates with you, not what somebody told you ought to be doing. Unless, of course, it was your teacher and you agreed. All right, another thing is we can cultivate gratefulness at that point. It's a meme nowadays. It's a little bit, everyone is cultivating gratefulness, and the reason why is because it works. It goes against a negative state of mind. And so it's very common for people to write down 3 things they're grateful for, even if it's the same things every day. But it goes against the, oh no, here comes another day mind. Or writing something good or inspiring. Some people pick up a book and read just like one quote, say for instance, from Swami Vivekananda or whatever one would find inspiring. Then, if you're like me, the first thing you do after that is go find the coffee. I have lots of devotee friends. We make this into a ritual. You don't need to have any fancy puja clothes. It doesn't have to be any special dishes. Just making the coffee into another moment with the divine. And offer that coffee, make coffee, or if it's tea or whatever. If we're doing that, turn it into like a ritual. And understand, again, I'm being with the divine. If then we are jumping into the shower, I have some friends who use that as a kind of a meditation on purification. In other words, they get into the shower and they say the 7 holy rivers are purifying this body and mind. In other words, again, they're associating a mundane action that we would not ordinarily think of with some kind of spiritual, Again, we have to make it our own, but one devotee in Hollywood that was very strong on doing this actually converted a whole bunch of us to this, just simply by making it a habit. And he talked about it. I do it every day. Meditation. Yes, you can. That I can't meditate is an excuse. I'm sorry. It may mean that we have an unrealistic idea about what meditation really is. Partly because when the scriptures present meditation, they're presenting it in such a way as to present the most advanced form of it. Again, don't rush in there. Take transition time, whether morning, evening, or wherever. Don't go rushing. I do this, I'm sorry to say. Rushing in there, clonk yourself down, and expect your mind to be able to calm down. So that's why often, besides the fact that it's quiet early in the morning, that's why it's good to do it in the morning before we rev ourselves up to get going. It's better, however, to sit there and struggle with your mind than to skip it. Because we made the choice to be there. All right? I will tell you, my big struggle with the mind is the Ridgeley to-do list. And what happens when you go into meditate, your mind actually is very obedient. And whatever you start habitually thinking about, the next time you go to meditate, the mind will say, oh, she wants that. All right, so it's the to-do list time. And so it's better, though, to sit there in your meditation spot, if you have one, and struggle than to say, I can't meditate, and skip it. Because you have made the choice to be there. And that is one of the most important things about meditation. It's taking that time to say, yes, I'm going to stop and connect. And as Ramakrishna said, in another context, do you not know when the God who created the universe, do you think that the God who created this universe and everything in it does not know when she is being worshipped? He said that to M. And likewise, there's no meditation police. So it's better to show up. More ideal, of course, to calm the mind. But please don't think if we're there and our mind is scattered for that particular day that we're failing. We're not failing. Do not, however, and this is also from personal experience in the past, get your mind in habit of sleeping there. That if you allow your mind to think that your meditation time is nap time, that's what it will do. And it's better to go and rest, or to get up and walk around, can have some other kind of meditation that you can fall back on. This isn't really a lecture on meditation, so I'm just kind of giving things on the list. But I would like to convince people that just not to skip a time to be quiet, especially in the morning. And if we have a calm mind, fine, but don't feel desperate if we don't. You know, these are times, this is not 3,000 years ago. There is so much input into the modern mind that it takes a lot more time for it to calm down. And we need to remember that. You know, sometimes people, like I said, will think, but not give themselves time to settle down, and then it's time to get up again. Mind requires time to settle. And if all else fails, you can always go back to your phone. And the reason why I say that is because there are so many now meditation apps. And if all else fails, there are some wonderful meditation apps that can present guided meditations, or anything from guided meditations to just timers to all kinds of things that you can, if you are in a loud place, you have teenage kids, they're already making a huge ruckus when you're trying to meditate, to put the earbuds in and just have your time with a meditation app, or just music. Of course, there are the traditional spiritual practices that some people practice, like chanting or puja. Again, mindlessly doing it is better than skipping it. If you have, first of all, if you're going to do puja, hopefully you've thought about it rationally, and with all the other things that you have to do, you can actually accommodate what you think you would like to do. I have a friend who suddenly told me one day, I'm going to do a 16-item worship every day. Now that requires a huge amount of preparation, a huge amount of time, a huge amount of expense. And I thought, right, that is not possible. And it wasn't. So hopefully your puja is something that is small enough to be possible. If you want to do the full-on traditional kinds of puja, Indian-style puja with all purity rules invoked, that's your choice. But also remember, it's your spiritual life. You don't have to follow those rules in your own house. You might have to follow them at the Vedanta Society, and at Ridgeley we will invoke them as well. But in your own house, you can decide what is doable and what isn't. It's better to, if we decide to do these things, if we take in a sankalpa, if we take in the intention to do a puja every day or every third day or whatever, or chanting or whatever it is, it's better to do it mindlessly than to skip. But if we really have to skip, say I skipped a bunch of my sadhana this morning because I had to get on the bus to come down here, it's not the end of the world. The reason why I say mindless puja is better than doing it, is okay, doing it mindfully is better, is again, we've made the choice. We have broken our mind away from the usual distractions, and we're trying. We sat there, but our mind, we may know it so well. Until last year, I had, part of my sadhana was to chant the Lalita Sahasranama every day. And I have done it for like a couple decades. Ridgeley sometimes makes it impossible it's a long thing, it's 1,000 names. But you have to understand that if you do it that often, you can do it without paying the slightest bit of attention what your mouth is saying. And your mouth will go on chanting the names and your mind could be somewhere else. That's not ideal, but it's better than not doing something. Because again, we're connecting. The ideally is that we pay attention, and we all know that. We don't have to do these things. Something else might be the thing that connects us better. Now, breakfast. Some people like to offer it. Some people, again, are grateful for what is provided by the divine. Some people who have to make breakfast for others consciously tell themselves that they're doing it as service, either service to the divine in the other, whether it's our husband, wife, or kids, or whoever else. It's service to the divine, even if our kids say, that we are still doing it. Mom, I don't want it. So I hate that. We still are doing that. We all know what kids are capable of doing. Some people like to make a practice from one tradition or another, and all over the world there's many ways of doing this, of greeting the sun every morning. That whether it's the Gayatri Mantra from India or greeting the sun as many of the indigenous people do all over the world, some people love to do that. Whether it's from our window in the wintertime or actually go outside, that's our choice, or whether we even, if that's something. Another thing that we need to do, and this is one thing we need to do, is practice Tatiksha. Now, you've probably heard that word, and you've probably heard that the English word that's used to translate this Sanskrit word is forbearance. And forbearance to most of us means we kind of put up with it, right? Yeah. But that's not the, I'll show you. Tatiksha is a word that comes from the root that means to make sharp. And it's what we call a desiderative. So it's a word that has a desire embedded in it. So it's a desire to make sharp. What are we making sharp? Our mind, our heart. And so it's not about, forbear. It's about, yes, I want to realize the divine in this very life, in this very annoying situation. And it takes, we can't just do this. It takes determination. So there's an element of determination in this word Tatiksha. It's not passive at all. It's a, yes, I will. Yes, I will embrace this difficult situation. I don't have to like it, but I will embrace it. The behavior of others, we should be constantly telling ourselves, is not our business. Unless, of course, we have responsibilities for kids or people that we are supervising, etc. But that's only certain kinds of behavior. But in general, how others behave is not our business at all. And monitoring other people's behavior, and this happens in every ashram, let me tell you. It's just inevitable because that's human nature. And it doesn't also mean that we turn a blind eye to the events of, say, groups of people who are rightfully advocating for justice. It doesn't mean that at all. It means individual people's behavior that we might otherwise judge. So we want to absolutely avoid the 5 cancerous C's. I had forgotten about these, but somebody reminded me of them a couple weeks ago. This comes from Stephen Covey, the business, late Stephen Covey. All right, they are. And I really would like to say this is the gist of spiritual life here, of ethical spiritual life. The 5 C's are criticizing. We all know what that means. And that also means, some people say, well, I'm not criticizing, I'm just making an observation. Or I'm just helping. No. Other people's behavior, unless you have a certain responsibility built in, is not our purview, only ours. And we'll be a lot happier, by the way, if we avoid these C's. So, criticizing. The second one, complaining. That some people almost cultivate a habit and they're not even aware anymore that they're complaining. And that's how they communicate. It's one long complaint. We should be careful. It means that if we're going to embrace our life, we have to embrace our life. And if we're complaining, we need to understand there's something that we're not embracing. There's something that we're kind of whining about that we don't want. I hate to say it, but too bad we got it. Whether It's other people's behavior. Most of the time we complain about other people's behavior, let's face it. Or for those of us who are getting old, it's about the aches and pains and everything else that inevitably happens to the body. And for those of us who during the pandemic, the only place we went is to the lab and to the doctor, like that. So criticizing, complaining, comparing. Comparing ourselves to others is death. That especially if we're spiritual aspirants and we're going to compare ourselves to Sri Ramakrishna, and we are going to find ourselves failures. Sri Ramakrishna was extraordinary, and you have to remember that he said to his disciples, if you only do 1/16 of what I have done, you will succeed in your spiritual life. And so many more encouraging things. So comparing ourselves to others, feeling like others get more attention than we do, and sometimes we're doing this unconsciously. So we need to cultivate an awareness that knows when we do this. Competing. Oh, you'll find this in every ashram. That I can tell you some stories, which I won't, in Hollywood, that would blow your mind. People competing over the attention of the Swami. So that include, let's just say in the long past, pushing, shoving, any things that would cause your jaw to drop on the ground. So competing is not a good idea. We, in a certain case, if we're taking the Vedantic stance, thou art that. We are already that. We are already Brahman. We don't need to compete. There are things, nothing needs to be added to us. There are things that we need to lose, and the 5 C's are what they're about. So, criticizing, complaining, comparing, competing, and the last one is contending. And sometimes people don't know what that means, but it's like, well, Paula is looking like that because she thinks that da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and it goes on, the whole story that we build up, when I actually have no clue why she looks like what she is. I'm contending that, again, from the annals of the ashrams, the Swami wouldn't look at me because he's mad at me. These kinds of things. How do you know, really? Or most of the time, contending can be thought of as accusation. We get into an argument with something, and then what happens is the laundry list comes out. Well, you did this, and you did this, and you did this, and you did this, and suddenly the person has regressed 20 years of things that you did. And they know better than you what you're thinking. So this is contending. I used to have a running joke. I was lucky enough to be one of Swami Swahananda's sevaks. They're the person that helped him with his daily life, especially when he was older. And I used to have a running joke with him that, Maharaj, you have to look out, because if you even look in the other direction, someone's going to think that you're not looking at them. And he would laugh, because this is what contending is about. We cannot know the mental and emotional experience of another person unless they tell us. Hopefully, nicely. That otherwise they're contending. So we need to avoid these things absolutely. Now, let's see. I still have a long list. Make your yoga or any practice into a yoga. In other words, most of yoga, qigong, tai chi is about moving energy, prana, through the body. Understand that the divine moves through the body like that. So you could use it, say, in the puja, there's a thing called nyasa, where you're placing different kinds of energies on the body. You can use your yoga like that. You can use your tai chi like that. Understand that maybe the divine is moving through the body. An obvious one, take a walk. That we were just talking about how many beautiful parks are here, at least in New York City, let alone just outside of New York City. Take the time to go out in nature and understand that everything that you see is none other than the divine. Even here, in the middle of the most busy city block down there in Times Square, that's the divine, playing at being Times Square. You know, playing at being, what's that red guy? The Disney character that's down there? Elmo. And all the tourists and everybody else in a hurry, that's the divine. Every single person and thing that you see. And then likewise, you can, some people pray for those people, not for in a way of, oh, help these people, but just understand that these are all individuals going about their lives. There was a father in the Orthodox Christian world in Greece who made a point of praying for everybody he saw when a plane went over his house, his little hut. Keep a diary or a journal, just to see where your mind goes. Find time to practice recollection in pause. So say famously Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist teacher, would teach his people to pause before they answered the phone. The phone rings, they pause, they take time to breathe. I know at least one person, if not more, who will not go up the stairs without stopping at the bottom of the stairs and pausing. Build in pauses into your life. Pause before you answer the phone, pause before you jump into the car, pause when you can. This is how we build recollection all day long. Have a quote in your pocket or on your phone. That in the old days, it used to be in your pocket. Many sadhus do this. Favorite quote, take it out, read it every now and then. Nowadays, you can do that on your phone. And you can I actually have on my phone some little bells that ring once an hour that I use as mindfulness bells. If you have a house filled with holy pictures, or even pictures that remind you of the divine, and you're so used to going through the house that you don't even notice them, take some time every day to visit all of them. Swami Swahananda also used to do that. He had a room filled with holy pictures, and every morning he would walk to every single one of them. Not like me, who is one of the rescuers of everybody's broken deities, that it's got filled. I need to do that as well. That to stop. If you find that you are mindlessly walking past your holy pictures, change them somewhere else. You know, they don't have to be where they are forever. Change it up. Change the position so that they're new for a while and you notice them. And again, they don't actually have to be socially approved holy pictures. It has to be something that you connect with, that we connect with. Obviously, at the end of the day, offer all your actions, not just the good ones, because we are that. Don't think that we can fool some divine into thinking that they don't notice everything that we think and do, right? And that's the joy of it, is that the divine exists in and through us no matter what the state of our mind is. It's not just when we're in a good mood. Bad moods, trials, tribulations, illnesses, health, whatever it is, offer it up. There is a famous prayer that's usually chanted at the end of a homa fire offering. No matter what I may have said, done, or thought, with my mind, my hands, may all this be an offering of Brahman. I offer up my heart and all that I have at the feet of so-and-so. So something like that. Not just the good things, whatever I may have done. I'm going to stop. There's a little bit more on the list, but there's a question and answer session. So do you want to have that now? Should I chant what? I'll chant now, and then we can to say thank you for everyone to come. It's really fun and nice to be here after so long. Hopefully the pandemic doesn't keep on like this. I mean, you know, it has in the past, and we will be able to move back and forth between the centers. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat.
I was reading in the Gita, it said that obviously desire is an issue for all our problems. But then it says that sankalpa is the bottom of the desires. At the bottom of the desires is sankalp, so you need to get rid of sankalp. But you were talking about maybe the positive sankalp. So is there a difference in that?
Yeah. The Bhagavad Gita says we need to be nirasha, or sometimes it says nirashi. And that means, typically it's translated as without wish. And sankalpa almost means we're setting an intention, which means almost, you could say, like a wish. But my understanding is that, first of all, nirasha, we could understand to be without expectation, rather than without desire, without wish. That if we're yogis in the mountains, then maybe without desire. But just commonplace daily desires, we need them to, actually we need a desire to realize the divine in order to do it. And so that kind of sankalpa, it does say in the Gita to abandon all sankalpas, but I think it probably means to abandon all kinds of other kinds of, like Swami Vivekananda said, take up one ideal. Don't take up 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 ideals. So put all our mind, as much as we can, into one. Sankalpa typically means thoughts, literally means thoughts coming together. And I mean it in the sense of the way that we do it, say for instance in a ritual, where at the very beginning of every ritual, it's stated why we're doing the ritual and what for. I mean, and who for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the sankalpa to the decision to remember the divine throughout our day is actually not probably what the Gita was talking about when it said abandon all sankalpas.
Thank you.
I hope this was helpful. That really, this is the wonderful thing about Ask the Sisters, is the sisters, of course, practice slightly differently according to who they are. And, you know, some of them are encountering illness and disability and never talk about it, so you wouldn't know it. Some of them have a very, like I said, a very, very devotional kind of, very simple, and others are way more philosophically oriented and Advaitic, non-dual. And so there's a perspective on everything, and the questions tend to be about practical things. The sisters are absolutely capable of giving a Vedantic talk, every one of them, but we, and I think I'm right, we, in the sense of speaking for all of us, the sisters, we kind of feel that there's a huge need for there to be the down-to-earth, practical kinds of talk about, because Vedanta likes to give the ideal, but it is not very good at saying this is how you get to this ideal. So we'll say, practice ahimsa. Well, how? And ahimsa is only the beginning. So this is it's so, so important for us to feel that we're not failing because we don't live up to some kind of a standard. When we are that already, how could we fail? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make a lick of sense. So we are that. No God somewhere else that's going to bestow some kind of realization on us. This is not the Advaita Vedanta position. The Vedantic position is we are that already. Nothing needs to be added to us, but there are some things that we need to lose in order to perceive that. And this is why it's so important to take the life that we have. Do we have a lot of kids making a lot of noise, or a really busy job that keeps us 12 hours a day at work, or illness that makes it so it's impossible almost to get out of bed in the morning? We should practice from there and not from where we wish we were. Because again, if you analyze it, it's ridiculous. We are that already. So thank you. It was a pleasure